Well, glad that you guys were able to make it. My name is Eddie Knight. I work at Sonatype. I am what some folks refer to as a sponsored contributor. And actually, this is going to be the first time that I get to do a talk where I get to discuss a lot more about what that means and what that role is. Because this talk is about the CNCF's Technical Oversight Committee, the technical advisory groups, the technical community groups, and they've given me way too much time to discuss it, which means I get to just weave this into a narrative, build a story for you. You're excited. I'm excited. We're going to figure out what this story is. So for me, a lot of this open source stuff started at the beginning of my career. I started my career after open source was commonplace. Some of us built open source as part of our career. Thank you for creating the world that we now get to appreciate. But I was born into this darkness that we now live in. And there was always this phrase, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And things like Kubernetes are the giants that we stand on. The types of technologies that we're able to build all of these clouds on were just myths to me in my early career. And I never could have imagined actually getting highly involved in the open source communities. But now I'm a security advisor for CNCF. I am chair of the FinTech Open Source Foundation's Oversight Committee, which is super fun. And with some of you guys, I get to hang out in a lot of different calls and meetings and co-maintain projects that help people do their governance and security a little bit better. And it's fun. It's exciting. But we're going to make this a narrative. When I first started my career, I was not one of those cool kids that got to go work at like Bloomberg, right? Which is, I think, probably why I was absolutely terrified by this myth of bigger, cooler folks, because I was doing freelance websites, just trying to set up S3 buckets and configure databases and praying to the CSS gods that pixel would just move slightly to the left for once today. Git was just a absolute terror of just like, I don't know, if I memorize these few commands, then maybe I'll survive the rest of the day. But I got the privilege of working for a gentleman who is now a Argo maintainer. And at the time he was not. He was just Jason, the guy who really didn't like when I skimmed his PRs, when I didn't take good notes and make good function names. And he really kind of prepped me for the world that was to come when I started subcontracting under him. And I went on to work out in North Carolina, building out a private data center with Samaritan's Purse. And that was weird, right? Learning a lot of, like, going from websites to going to like disaster recovery conversations and high availability conversations and just like running cables was not something I thought I would do when I was learning JavaScript. But it was really, really exhilarating. And the most impactful moment that I had at that job was when I realized that the 2-day outage crisis, just absolute disaster that all of my colleagues were having. Well, I was kind of like this junior. I was onboarding. I was learning Ansible, right? They gave me some playbooks. They were like, run this, create a thing, destroy a thing. And I'm just doing it over and over. I'm like, oh, what happens if I change this? What happens if I do that? 2 days into this outage that the rest of the team is handling, they turn over to me and they're like, hey, did you run a destroy script on some databases? I'm like, yeah, I've been doing a lot of that. Like, yeah, that explains everything. Have you been doing it repeatedly for the last 2 days? I'm like, yeah, you told me to like practice. can you not do it for the next 30 minutes and let's see if it changes anything? Yeah, sure. Oh, that fixed everything because this guy stopped deleting our databases on repeat for 2 days. So that was really fun. That was very much burned in my memory. Two things. Two things stand out. One is that when we're thinking of security, it's not always malicious, but sometimes it's mistakes. Compliance folks might call this negligence. And negligence has two components. One is the person who neglected to know that the thing they were doing is going to cause a severe problem for lots of people and lose lots of money. And negligence is also when somebody could have set up some boundaries for this and didn't. They didn't tell the new guy, don't run that script. And they didn't think to, like, I don't know, make a script that doesn't destroy the prod database whenever it's run. So there's kind of these previews that I'm getting into, like the open source world and the security world. And after that job, I went to work at Bank of America. I contracted over there where I was building out back end, doing a lot of like Python engineering. And it was a segue from like data center middleware to this world of I'm gonna set a timer so I don't lose track of where we're going. All right, to building out infrastructure deployments. So we had one team whose job was to build a like WYSIWYG for infrastructure. So it's like, oh, you take this square and that's your database, and take this circle and draw a line, and now you've established a network. And that would all vomit out into some JSON. We had another team that was building out a bunch of infrastructure as code. And then my team's job was to take whatever nightmare mess of JSON came from that team and convert it into statements that could deploy infrastructure as code for this other team. It was super fun until that team got defunded and they moved on to VMware, which was objectively a better solution than what we could build in-house. And I got moved on to the NeoCloud, which was a really weird adventure. And that transitioned me over into a contract at Morgan Stanley, which took all of those learnings and set me up to do something else that I had absolutely never done, which was we were actually writing the infrastructure as code, we were writing the reusable patterns, and we were supporting the application teams for about 20 client-facing applications to deploy all of their apps out. And so building those pipelines was my job, coordinating 2 different teams that were interacting with all of the customers, internal customers that are building applications. A lot of platform engineering type of activities, SRE type of activities we were doing. And in that season, somebody asked me, could you go watch this open source community? And I'm like, oh my God, the open source people? That's actually really exciting. Those guys are cool. And I went and I sat in on these calls and they were so boring, like deathly boring. They were bankers theorizing about possible solutions to pain points that they could maybe agree on. And it was just, every week I'd sit in on this call, and it was just, I was asked to sit in on the call, so I did sit on the call. But the veneer of open source was just like shattered, just instantly. I'm like, okay, this is a nuanced world, a very, very nuanced world that we are supporting all of our infrastructure and everything. Now, funny thing was, at one point in those calls, they mention, hey, we need a particular thing. Like they described this problem set. It was, we need a tool that can do something like Cucumber for behavioral driven development tests, but it's specially designed for our like policy driven tests, so we can make control catalog statements and put them into BDD and then run tests that scan infrastructure to see if it's compliant. And I was like, oh, I built that over here. Do you guys want to use it? I'm just like, oh, that's so cool. So out of nowhere, I was suddenly an open source maintainer because I just had some software that they needed, and I was able to open source it Morgan Stanley is actually like really ahead of the curve on enabling open source contributions. So I was very, very lucky about that. And then I'm just suddenly an open source maintainer. And all of the baggage that comes with that. Over the next 6, 12 months, that journey took loads of twists and turns, but I really, really believed in the story of this project, the goals, the pain points. I was like, okay, these pain points are real. These are real problems that need to be solved, and if we can solve these problems, we will change the world. Most maintainers feel that way. Insert your problem. That's probably what a maintainer somewhere is thinking, and that's why they're like a dog on a bone helping solve that problem. You can't throw anything in their way that'll distract them. They're just going to keep solving that problem. And that is the beauty of open source. And I got to experience that firsthand as I saw other people getting distracted and moving on, and I just could not let go of this. I was like, oh man, I'm one of those guys. I'm becoming more familiar with this. I started like building a little bit more of my identity around like, oh, I'm an open source maintainer. And someone came to me and was like, hey, we need help. It was Sonatype, my current employer. They're like, we need somebody who is familiar with open source, familiar with financial service institutions, and can do this like developer advocacy stuff. Now, I was remarkably bad at that. They want blogs, they want talks. I'm not good at giving talks about products and things like that. It's just not a skill set I have. Love to talk. They hired me for that. They're like, you like your own voice. I do like my own voice. You're hired. Sell our stuff. Not so good at that. But what I was good at was coming out and making friends with other maintainers and connecting with people, finding out what's your problem, how do we solve your problem, what are you working on, how can I connect you with somebody else who's working on something similar, how can we accelerate these things. And from there, I was asked to help out with the security slam because Sonatype was sponsoring the security slam for CNCF, and they had kicked it off, and they did these big announcements, and they put out flyers, and they had a name and almost nothing else. It was just a thing that they were doing, and there was no plan. And they brought me in, and they're like, can you just do something? I was like, oh, crap. So with no experience with CNCF, and sometimes kind of embarrassing myself looking back on the issues that I was opening up on projects repos, I started reaching out to people like, hey, can we help you improve your security posture? And we had this thing called Clo Monitor back then that had a set of tests that we would use. And those tests, if we help you get your percentages up, we'll give you a prize. And that was done through tag security. Tag security doesn't exist anymore. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But that was my intro into CNCF. Through tag security, running events, helping people, these projects improve their security posture. And then Andy Martin comes to me and says, will you take my spot as a chair? And I'm like, I don't know what that means. And he's like, perfect. Everybody who does know what it means has said no. Like, all right, thanks, Andy. So I became a chair of the CNCF Technical Advisory Group for Security while I was also doing compliance maintenance inside of the FinTech Open Source Foundation. And fast forward a little bit, find a pain point over inside of OpenSSF where they're wanting to create a standard set of control catalogs. They kept using this word baseline. And I was like, hey, you can't create a baseline for just one foundation when the opportunity to do a cross-foundation, agnostic, scalable, useful for everybody, the opportunity for that exists. So let's make something useful for everybody. And overnight, like it was Friday when I talked to Dana at OpenSSF, and by Monday, she's like, I set you up a working group. Here's a spot on the OpenSSF calendar. I've sent out an email blast. I got it approved by the OpenSSF Technical Advisory Committee Council. I don't know, TAC. And I'm just like, whoa. Okay, that's very lucky of me to be able to be pulled into that. Now, downside is there's a lot of work, many many hours spent writing controls for a completely new use case, not similar to the controls that I've been writing over in Finos. But then we realized that a lot of the ways that we were writing those controls were similar, and so we made a new project called Jamara. Shout out to the Jamara maintainers in the room. The standard for how we were writing security controls became a problem, so we solved it in a shared space, and now we have folks, myself from Sonatype, CVS, Red Hat, Gen, are maintaining this standard for how we're writing security controls because we had a shared pain point. And then from there, eventually I got asked to chair the TOC over inside of Finos, and I got a lot more perspective into what it means to govern all of these projects instead of just maintaining them. Started focusing on securing them, then started focusing on governing them and leading them. And that gave me a lot more perspective into this recent reboot that we've had in CNCF. This year, part of the 10-year growth and celebration of CNCF, they've thrown out all the old tags, just like none of the old tags exist anymore. We're doing a completely new thing. And the TOC has this scope. One of these things is absolutely unshakably within their scope, which is projects. And then there's also initiatives, subprojects, TCGs, and tags that the TOC has chartered, they've defined. They get to decide how these things operate. They are the final authority on whether these things exist, how they run, and all of that. There are certain responsibilities that are assigned to the TOC in the CNCF charter. These are inalienable responsibilities that the TOC does not get to pick and choose from, and I put those up on here just for fun, just to kind of reference. There are certain things that the TOC always has to do, and every foundation names these. So in my role over inside of Finos, we have a different list from this, but this is what's written down inside of the foundation charter for CNCF. I couldn't quote it because it's kind of scattered across different places, but these are the parts that I found that were specifically responsibilities of the TOC. And then within the TOC's own documentation, they've assigned themselves certain responsibilities. And so we can see in there that while they have the responsibility to oversee projects, they've set up domain technical reviews to decide what their opinions of projects are. So they've set up their own health process, promotion process, things like that. These are decisions that the TOC has made for itself, and they're accountable to follow through on those. They are the ones who charter subgroups that I mentioned a second ago, and I'm going to keep talking about subgroups for the rest of this after this slide. And then leadership for those groups. Any escalations, if a group can't figure something out. So if myself and one of the tech leads in this room just really come to odds about something, then we would go to the TOC and they would just say, you're both fired, go home. Maybe not, hopefully not that. And then when there are things like white papers that are written, there used to be a little bit less interaction with the TOC. It was kind of a rubber stamp at the end of the day. But lessons learned, the TOC is taking a lot more active process in this. And they've assigned themselves the responsibility of reviewing and approving just any release that goes out. Another artifact, and this is actually the last artifact from the TOC that I'm going to mention, is the technical leadership principles. There are 6 principles that are written down and documented by the TOC. And these are actually really, really good and insightful. These are written from, you can go onto the website. Rion can probably tell us exactly where to find it, or you can just go trawl the internet to find it where I found it. But here's an example of some of the text for the final bullet point, right? Which is that anytime a decision's made, it needs to be written down. So that way people can not only understand why, but they can follow the lineage of that decision, and it can help inform future decisions. These are the principles. These are the things that can actually decide whether a leader continues to be a leader within the foundation. Now, moving on to those colors that I showed earlier, projects are one of the key things that the TOC is responsible for overseeing, but according to the CNCF's charter, the thing that the TOC doesn't write, the projects that the TOC does approve should be lightly overseen by the TOC. And so this is not a hands-on authoritative control, but what we see it manifest in health checks, promotion standards, things like that. The next thing is subprojects. This is a new term. This is a term that's come about this year from the TOC. It should not be mistaken with a project subproject. I actually can't tell you why they chose this word. They made a decision, I don't quite get it. The TOC has subprojects that can report directly to the TOC. They can also report to tags. So these are not project subprojects. Though a project can have subprojects, those are completely different. A subproject for a project is more like, we have 5 repos, 4 of them are subprojects, and they all bundle up into the project. This is a long-standing initiative. If we have something that we're doing that's gonna take us a year to do, we'll want to spin up a subproject, and there's a separate governance structure for how that long-running activity is gonna do. Long-running activity is obviously the opposite of a short-running activity. There's a separate governance structure for how initiatives are handled within the CNCF. The TOC can allocate their own initiatives. Also, tags can allocate initiatives. For a short period, there was a requirement that all initiatives are approved by the TOC. I believe, I'm not gonna say it authoritatively, but I believe that that is now passing. I haven't seen it written down anywhere, but I'm pretty sure my understanding is that now the initiatives that tags launch are, Jen, you're not nodding or shaking your head, so I was hoping, okay, I'm on the right track, all right. Initiatives that are launched by tags are able to be self-approved. So that's something that the tags can decide for themselves for the short-running things. Rion is also giving me a thumbs up. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So that is a fact. All right, now the last structure to mention is the TCGs, technical community groups. The biggest of these is platform engineering. Platform engineering previously existed within tag architecture and now has been spun off because it is not producing artifacts, it's not producing advice and guidance to the projects. This group is not participating in technical reviews, things like that. So TCGs are primarily structured around knowledge sharing. So we have a shared trauma, we have shared objectives, we have shared interests. We're going to want to be talking about the same things. TCGs in today's world are primarily going to be virtual. You're also going to see a lot of TCG activity at these events. Platform engineering is the flagship TCG because it is kind of grandfathered over. eBreak was pulled on the previous version. They're rebooting now. All week this week, I think there's coffee every morning with the platform engineering group. They're actually really fun people, so if you get a chance to go hang out with them, definitely do it. I recommend their coffee. I don't recommend their evening stuff. Don't trust those dudes. Last thing, tags. Tags are the technical advisory groups. The A advisory is carrying a lot of weight here in that the tags are expected to advise on the technical reviews. They're expected to produce white papers, guidance, things like that. And also just generally support projects, project health, project growth, project security in the case of my tag. And they're generally just the most fun places you should hang out in tags. Here is a list of the 5 tags. Operational resilience, workloads, foundation, developer experience, security and compliance, and infrastructure. Those are the 5. I've got another slide for each of those here in a second. Seems like everybody's done taking pictures of that slide. So I'm going to talk more about what each of those specific tags are doing very quickly because I don't want to be the authority on somebody else's topic. Instead, I'm going to tell you where to go find more information about them. But here is a quick look at what each tag does. That last bullet point on there, number 7, carries the most weight, which is fostering project maturity. Everything rolls down into that. The previous 6 points all just kind of roll down into these are the ways that tags foster project maturity. And you can go to that link to look at a lot more about how all of these governance structures are done. I want to pause right here to see if I have time for questions. And it looks like I don't, but does anybody have like a really burning question before I start talking about what each of those tags is doing and expressing? Good. I didn't give you enough time to ask questions, so you're not asking questions. I love the way that the microphone works. Abby's going to be talking about platform engineering on the keynotes the last day of Thursday. So that's going to be a really fun keynote to go check out. I don't think she's going to be talking about how the TCG is structured, things like that, but it'll be a fun look at the way that CNCF is approaching those topics. Here's a list of the things that they're doing right now. I got this list updated last night from Colin, who's one of the leads over there. One of the coolest things that I saw them doing is Battle of the Architectures. This is actually really cool, where they had folks who created reference architectures of like, hey, this is how we did it inside our end user organization. And then somebody else said, hey, this is how we did it inside of our end user organization. And then they scheduled one of their community calls and had the two just like kind of present why each of theirs was better than the others. It's just a fun thing to do. Crap, no, tags are the fun ones, not TCGs. Super cool. Now, moving on to the tags. Tag developer experience, also pretty new. It's one of the ones that has been restarted, it's not like tag security, which was restarted into tag security and compliance. So they're starting up some new initiatives. So these are the things that you can look out for them. But if you're thinking about things like how are developers using your project, this group is the place to go to think about that. Operational resilience. How do I make sure that my project stays online after it's turned on? This is a really good group to talk about that. Green reviews is something that's coming up, and that's like green, like environmentally friendly. What's the environmental impact of your particular thing? And then project release guidelines, right? How do you release your project in a sustainable fashion? Workloads Foundation is kind of just what it sounds like, right? They're like, what are all the foundations of the cloud native systems that we're building, and how do we do those well? And so now that we're in the AI era, thinking about scheduling AIs is going to be a really challenging topic, and that's a white paper that they're working on. If you're interested in that, or if you have expertise on that, go help them work on that white paper. Go help review it, critique it, give input on that. And then the subproject for batch subsystems just kicked off, but it is going to be a long-running project. So that's something to go participate in over time. Infrastructure has a lot of resources that already exist. They're working on the third version of the storage landscape. Any time that you go to their calls, you're probably going to see some tooling presentations. You're going to learn about different projects in the ecosystem that are dedicated to infra. Now, the absolute king and greatest of all of the tags, and the best one that you could possibly interact with, is tag security and compliance. This is a place for people like me when I was early in my career. All of these tags are, this one for sure. If you are interested in security topics, if you're working and you're aware and you're wanting to participate in just the discussions around security or how compliance is done with these projects, this is a really fun place for you to come and hang out with us. I didn't run out of time here, so I can take a breath. I really want to just urge everybody to look at the TOC, the tags, and the community groups, and don't look at these as the mythical senior leaders that you hope to someday be. Now, if you know that you're so far early in your career that you're not at that same level, that's awesome. All the more reason to come hang out. Try to be like Jen. Try to learn from Rian. Freaking pray that you get time with Rob. That dude's cool. Don't miss the opportunity to get involved with these types of things. And if you have the ability to come and provide your senior level expertise, bring it. Come and bring that to the community and help us elevate all the projects. Thank you guys, appreciate your time.